North Node in Pisces and in the 12th house. Introduction. With your North Node in Pisces in the 12th house, your North Node is doubled down in the house ruled by its same sign. This means that what you have mastered in the past you have overdone to an extreme, and it may be, or may have been, if you are further along your journey, more difficult for you than most to overcome your emotions and stay grounded. If you have personal planets in water signs, this may come more naturally to you, but depending on your specific chart, it could be more challenging. Having your North Node in Pisces in the 12th house means your South Node is in Virgo in the 6th house. The sign, Pisces, of your North Node signifies the qualities you need to develop, but the house, 12th house, indicates in what area of leaf A you most need to express them. Likewise, the sign, Virgo, of your South Node signifies the qualities you need to let go, but the house, 6th house, indicates from what area of life you most need to walk away. Qualities to cultivate: healing, compassion, unconditional love, creativity, fantasy and imagination, letting go, trust and faith, going with the flow, acceptance, unity consciousness. Where to cultivate them: solitude, spirituality and mysticism, the subconscious, unconscious, and collective conscious, hidden thoughts and repressed feelings, isolating institutions such as hospitals, monasteries, and prisons, dreams and imagination, universal archetypes, rest and restoration, hidden enemies and self-sabotage, altruism and selfless service. Qualities to let go: logic, anxiety, guilt, exaggerating the importance of detail at the expense of the big picture, separation consciousness, obsession, criticism and fault-finding, self-righteousness, perfectionism, analysis paralysis. Where to let go: job and co-workers, techniques and methods, daily routine, health, exercise, and nutrition, pets, problem-solving, awareness and value of time, necessities, mental health, habits, understanding the axis. Having the North Node in Pisces in the 12th house places you on the existence axis. It is the body, spirit axis. It's a mutable axis of both physical and spiritual well-being. You may be too focused on or too detached from your body, too impractical or too unimaginative, too structured or too undefined. House 6 is ruled by Virgo and Mercury, though some say Vesta, which governs our mind and communication. The 6th house is the house of service. It's where our daily work and routine take place, and where we go to take care of our bodies. Virgo is detail-oriented, analytical, and communicative. Pisces, on the other hand, likes to lay back and look at the big picture. Pisces rules House 12, a complicated house of all that is hidden, spirituality, the unconscious, secrets. It's ruled by Neptune, planet of dreams and illusion. Virgo will fuss about the scrape on your knee and insist you need a doctor. Pisces will help you relax and remember that we all get scraped up in life. Both can be too self-sacrificing. Your life path involves balancing being hardworking and practical with trusting the universe and accepting the ebb and flow of life. Material versus immaterial is a major theme of your life. Your karmic classroom is in aligning your daily routine with your spiritual beliefs and deepest dreams. The mutable axes deal with our belief systems, so becoming either rigid or directionless are signs of imbalance. With your North Node in Pisces in the 12th house, you may be neurotic, too attached to the physical body, and too caught up in all the details that could go wrong. You need to learn to let go of what is outside your control and trust that there are benevolent forces working behind the scenes for you. They have your best interests at heart, whether you can see it or not. Beware of your fear for survival and need for control. Instead, let go to let in, and embrace the interconnectedness of all life. Tend to your subconscious. Whenever you have an Earth South Node and a Water North Node, your natural tendency is to be too rigid and ignore feelings, your own or others, at the expense of everyone's emotional well-being. You've got to learn to see emotional health as equally important as physical health, and carve out the time to tend to your own emotional, psychological, and spiritual needs. Let go of perfectionism and the desire for control and instead merge into the great river of life. Understanding is the central power of this axis. Understanding and caring for the physical body and practical, daily affairs of life and work, as well as understanding the unity behind the illusion of separateness and the deeper spiritual truths that govern material life. You must see the truth of existence, a singularity expressed in the form of duality, so that it may know itself. This plays out especially in your body, and your physical health is an indicator of your spiritual and psychological health. Like the other mutable axis of 3/9, this is about seeing how the part fits into the whole, and how the whole supports the part. Your life lessons come through the ways you serve others, and the degree to which you understand the connection between the visible and invisible. The existence axis is about physical versus spiritual and psychological health, unity versus separateness, singularity versus duality, seclusion versus participation, details versus big picture, inner world versus outer world, order versus disorder, presence versus escapism, communication versus silence, criticism versus acceptance, realism versus imagination, and doing versus being. This axis is about managing self-care with care for others. Like all astrological axes, it's about balance. It isn't about obsessing over the body and details or neglecting the body to lose yourself in the psycho-spiritual realm, but learning to meet in the middle. It means having compassion for oneself as well as others, including all living beings, but still exercising healthy emotional boundaries. It means knowing when to work and when to rest. When you master this axis, you will have a holistic approach to health, empathy with boundaries, and selfless service without self-sacrifice. Ultimately, it is about balance. Perhaps you are already on your way. Your quest to cultivate faith and unity consciousness. With your North Node in Pisces in the 12th house, your quest is to experience the perfection of all that is without trying to control it by pursuing a spiritual path. You have a compulsive need to control the external world through creating order, not realizing that everything is already in its right place. The problem is not what is, but your judgment of what is. At the root of this critical judgment is a lack of trust in life and in others. You think that if only everything and everyone behaved according to how you think it should be, things would be okay and you could relax. What you must realize is that you have no idea how anything should be, not even yourself. It's only once you surrender to the power of life itself, and begin to not only see but experience the unity of all life, that you will begin to develop this level of faith. While you may resist this due to your rigidly logical nature that only sees the superficial aspect of reality, cultivating faith and following the spiritual path is the only way you will alleviate your anxiety and achieve the inner peace you so long for. You bring a spirit of selfless service into this world due to many lifetimes devoted to helping and healing others. However, you have taken this to excess and now use it to avoid facing your own inner life. Your pragmatic, healing nature will serve you well once you learn to turn it on yourself. Eventually you'll recognize that sometimes the practical way to heal is to heal emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. Only then will the nervous system relax enough to allow the body to heal. Humility and acceptance are the keys to this placement. You don't have to follow a religion or believe in a god in order to pursue this path. This is the same deep psycho-spiritual journey experienced by Carl Jung, Albert Einstein, Friedrich Nietzsche, and more, a universal and innately human experience. Your past, strengths, and excesses. Don't worry, you don't have to leave everything about the South Node behind. Again, it's about balance. The trick in balancing out the South Node is to embody the positive aspects while leaving behind the excessive and negative qualities. With a South Node in Virgo in the 6th house, paying attention to detail and doing everything fastidiously comes naturally to you, but this is not your path this time around. In the past you were often operating under conditions of crisis in which you had to get everything exactly right or else deal with severe consequences. You likely spent past lifetimes in medical professions, such as a surgeon, doctor, or nurse who had to perform perfectly or else you would cause someone's death. This is why you may struggle with a constant sense of urgency and an attachment to doing things correctly, and having everyone around you do the same. You might really hate surprises. When you're caught off guard or something doesn't go according to the plan in your head, subconsciously you think someone's going to die. You may still be very health conscious, fear contamination, and need to keep your environment clean and orderly. Karmic issues often include health ailments, especially those not easily resolved by Western medicine or a logical approach. You may have also spent past lives in service roles, such as a cleaner, housekeeper, servant, butler, valet or driver, restaurant worker, hotel employee, or other position that meant you had to serve others and did not hold a lot of power. You had to be diligent and detail-oriented in order to do your job well, or else people would complain. You were accustomed to not having any power and to putting others' needs ahead of your own. You likely still have a strong sense of duty and service, with an ability to anticipate others' needs and meet them, usually before meeting your own needs. You have a very grounded, practical approach to life, and unless other aspects or placements contradict this, you likely navigate the material world very well. You're not only good at taking care of yourself physically, but you excel at caring for others. People of this placement are some of the most useful and selfless people, and are often taken advantage of for this reason. On some level, you truly love to be of service to others and to make the world a better place. But you also use this as an excuse to avoid yourself. You are so grounded that you have lost touch with the divine. You lack a deep and sincere spiritual faith and connection to the oneness of life. In the past, you had set rules and procedures to follow and may have grown up in a household that was either rigid and orderly or a total mess you couldn't stand to be in. You followed the same daily routine and lived a very repetitive, monotonous existence. You were incredibly analytical, noticing every detail and extrapolating meaning from it. You likely take a highly logical approach, which helps. Until it doesn't. You are confused when logic doesn't solve all your problems. Unless other placements in your birth chart contradict this, you are likely excessively attached to form while ignoring real substance, so you get distracted by extraneous detail while losing the plot. The problem is that you fail to distinguish between what is important and what is unimportant. Loved ones may get frustrated with you because you can't just let the little things go. You are likely never satisfied with anything. People may call you a perfectionist, complaining that your standards are too high. It's simply that your past conditioned you to do things in an exacting and flawless way, or else you faced severe consequences. You may have had a very strict parent with high standards who only gave you very conditional love. You were so focused on performing perfectly that you didn't get to be a child, you didn't get to explore your imagination or feel your natural connection to the world around you. This instilled you with a belief that if you were not perfect, you did not deserve love, acceptance, and compassion. Of course, this is not only erroneous but a completely impossible belief to maintain, as no one can achieve perfection. As a result, you can be extremely judgmental and critical, because you project your own issues onto others and expect them to behave according to the plan that you have in mind, never mind what anyone else wants or believes, let alone what is true. Of course, you are hardest of all on yourself. In your early life, it's possible you endured spiritual abuse, when someone hands you an inner critic and tells you it's the voice of God. It can take a lot of time and work to extract this false voice from your mind. Perhaps the most essential aspect of this placement is to unlearn this false belief and cultivate unconditional love based on your intrinsic value instead. You are likely a workaholic as you believe this is the only way to prove your worth to the world. You may often drive yourself into health crises and sacrifice your relationships. In fact, karmic relationships for you often show up in the workplace. You may be a micromanager. You are accustomed to situations with clear rules, routines, and roles, but you are overly attached to them to an illogical degree, in which your lack of flexibility actively hurts your business and endeavors. Yet when you try to let go of this mentality, you are swamped by self-doubt, uncertainty, and anxiety. Because you lack trust in the unknown, you feel that if you don't know everything that's going on, then you will lose control and disaster will strike. Of course, control is always an illusion. Unfortunately, it is easy for you to neglect yourself and sacrifice your own needs for others. South Node Virgo 6th house people can be the most dramatically self-sacrificing of all placements. You are likely very intellectual with strong analytical abilities and a desire for constant self-improvement through knowledge and understanding. This can make you an interesting and sometimes impressive person on the surface, but you lack depth. In favor of logic and facts, you overlook emotion and intuition, then wonder why your decisions don't work out. You are learning that there are limits to logic, and that it isn't universally applicable. Folks with this placement often carry a lot of guilt and anxiety, usually without any logical or conscious reason. Much of this is carried over from past lives in which you lived in a constant state of anxiety over potential mistakes with dramatic consequences, and when you inevitably did make a mistake, because you're human, something terrible happened for which you still feel guilty. You therefore have a subconscious need to punish yourself, often through your own self-criticism and obsessively anxious thoughts. You are a wonderful friend to have because you are so naturally selfless and helpful, often in the most practical ways that others neglect. You may pride yourself on being useful and helpful to others, never hesitating to lend a helping hand even if it means sacrificing your own desires or even needs. You may tend to excessively selfless service, constantly putting others' needs ahead of your own. You are naturally sensitive and empathetic, with a keen ability to understand others. You can anticipate both their feelings and their needs, and due to your giving nature, you can't help but help others. However, you lack boundaries and easily allow yourself to be taken advantage of. You may often use your own guilt or feelings of inadequacy as excuses for this, refusing to admit to yourself when you're unhappy with an arrangement. This is an easy way for you to avoid yourself and your own needs and to repress your true feelings and self. You naturally become overwhelmed by others' emotional needs and often play peacemaker. Chaos, surprises, and new situations easily disturb your peace. You prefer the familiar and routine situations in which you know what role to play. You believe you have to know everything ahead of time, to be able to predict the future and have all the answers before you've even started the class. You resist fluidity and change, and this makes you very tense emotionally and physically. You may be rigidly attached to your idea of how things should be, but you are often completely wrong. Unwilling to admit when you're wrong, you may persist in trying to force situations, which only causes harm. As a result, you are prone to escapism, but likely in unhealthy ways, through drugs, alcohol, excessive sleep, addiction to entertainment and social media, fantasy worlds, daydreaming, etc. Many of your karmic challenges will show up in your health. If there are doctors or nurses in your family, they are past life connections, though this is not necessarily bad. You may be a hypochondriac due to past lives or the early part of this life spent in hospitals and doctors' offices. But this very anxiety is what's likely to make you sick. You're also likely to overwork yourself and keep pushing even when you're exhausted. Burnout is a common experience with this placement, not the routine exhaustion people carelessly call burnout these days, but real burnout, the kind that creates an identity crisis and precipitates a dark night of the soul. Such a dark night of the soul is meant to push you into spiritual development, which has been lacking in your life. The root of your anxiety is in your lack of trust in a higher order or power, to which you can hand over responsibility for what is beyond your control. As long as you lack a sincere faith in such a power, you will be plagued by a vague sense of guilt and anxiety over what you cannot control and what you perceive to be going wrong in your life. The trick in balancing out the South Node is to embody the positive aspects while leaving behind the negative qualities. You are tempted to continue staying attached to your role with its specific rules and routines, but this is not your path this time around. Time for a new tactic. While this strategy worked very well for you in your early life or in past lives, it will now backfire on you. Instead, you need to develop your spiritual awareness, shift your focus from the small details to the big picture, release fear and anxiety, cultivate unconditional self-love and self-compassion as well as unconditional love and compassion for others, and learn to accept everything as it is and align yourself with the flow of life. Through this, you will develop an awareness of the oneness of all that is. You will alleviate the constant guilt and anxiety that hangs over you. Instead of limiting yourself with logic, you're meant to look beneath the surface and develop your intuition. You must learn to let go of physical reality and look deeper to get at the truth of things. It is like moving from Newtonian physics to quantum physics. You must release your attachment to your role, plan, and rules because this limits the possibilities of what you can experience in this life. Definition is limitation, and when we stop giving ourselves and our lives these narrow definitions, we free ourselves up to what life can offer, which is always greater than we can imagine. You must let go of your need to control because it is coming from fear and anxiety and a lack of trust in others and in life. Instead, you are learning to take the risk of trusting others, including trusting them to take care of themselves without you breathing down their necks or telling them what to do. Practicing a creative craft, as a hobby or as a profession, is incredibly healing for you. It is important for you to explore your imagination, which may have been repressed in the past. While your attention to your physical health is likely very good, you must complement it by taking the same diligent approach to your mental and emotional health. You must recognize that your psychological health impacts your physical health as well, so to attend to only one aspect of health is incomplete. You are likely good at feeding your body, but you must now feed your soul. You may resist looking inward and reflecting too much on your past and subconscious, or resist spiritual topics, but your soul yearns to explore the ideas you've been ignoring. You actually have an innate ability to tap into the collective unconscious and understand both yourself and others. This sensitivity gives you a strong intuition, you just have to learn how to listen to it. Remember, anxiety screams but intuition whispers. You have a strong connection to your higher self, but you may drown out your intuitive voice with the incessant chatter of the logical and egoic mind. It is important here to distinguish between religion and spirituality. Religion comes from an external, human authority, spirituality comes from within. That doesn't mean that religious texts or speakers can't guide us to spiritual truths, but that we must be wary of obeying external authorities and going against our own soul and conscience. This is why all religions have a mystic tradition within them, and all mystic traditions align with one another regardless of what religion they follow. We all have a direct connection to the divine. Religion can be helpful for some, but it isn't necessary for everyone. Metaphysical and esoteric studies can help you tremendously, but above all it is essential for you to tune into your own inner voice and to trust it. You might not be able to hear it yet over the mental chatter. You are learning to be alone in order to tune into your inner voice and intuition. As you strengthen your intuition, you will gain a powerful inner ally and learn to trust yourself, able to move through the world with greater confidence and wisdom. Solitude helps you detach from your concerns and get in touch with the big picture and your vision for your life. It helps you rest and recuperate from all the work and worrying you do. You may work better alone. Because you likely process everything verbally, activities like journaling and therapy can really help you. They not only provide dumping grounds for your incessant mental chatter, but by directing your more neurotic energy here you alleviate some of the burden on your relationships, which can otherwise be drained by your need to over-communicate. Since in the past you have overdeveloped the capacity of the mind, your heart space is underdeveloped. That doesn't mean that you lack empathy or emotional depth, but that your heart is out of alignment with your mind. There are things you want, but because you have exclusively used the logical mind to pursue them, without truly believing in them with your heart, your efforts have backfired. It is only once we align the frequency of the heart with the frequency of the mind that we are able to manifest our desires. You are learning to put being before doing. We must be before we can do. Prioritizing our emotional state before we take decisions and action in the world helps us do everything better. When we are coming from a place of pessimism and anxiety, we will create more of that in our lives, but when we come from a place of trust and felt security and love, we will have a positive effect on others. Self-care is therefore very important for this placement. It is not about luxury and indulgence, but about recognizing that we are more productive and loving human beings when our own physical, emotional, and spiritual needs are fulfilled. Solitude, meditation, journaling, and activities in or near water can be enormously soothing for you. You have spent many lives healing and serving others. Now you are meant to turn your empathy and compassion onto yourself and focus on your own healing. You can actually become one of the great healers in this lifetime, but only once you have healed yourself first. While you have tremendous empathy for others, you easily lack boundaries and become invaded by others' emotional energy, or else, you invade other people's psychic space by imposing your own moods and opinions on them. You must learn to erect strong boundaries to protect both yourself and others from this energetic leakage. Otherwise, you get overwhelmed and/or project onto others and blame them for your own issues. You have spent many past lives mastering the physical, material, external world. Your mission now is to transcend this and connect with the spiritual and emotional reality that drives everything you see. Your inner compass is guiding you toward a more fulfilling life. It feels very risky, but it is not. You're just afraid of the unfamiliar. Life may bring you crises that force you out of your comfort zone and into the chaos of the unknown. One beautiful thing about this placement is that knowing who you deeply are, and loving that self unconditionally, is part of your destiny. You are meant to not only discover, but experience firsthand, the unity of all life, of which you are a part. Unconditional love is a big and beautiful lesson of this placement. You are learning to separate who you are from what you do, and release yourself from the pressure of performing perfectly in order to get your needs met and win love and acceptance. Instead, you're learning that you already deserve love simply because you exist, that life, in all its forms, carries intrinsic value and does not need to justify its existence. You must therefore release attachment to many of your ideas of who you think you are. The issue is this can be a long and painful process, and you may lose many things that you have habitually clung to, like your identity, social status, job, relationships, group affiliations, and more. But the more easily you release these things, the more they will be replaced by a greater sense of self, the sense of your higher self and unity with all life. What is finite will be replaced by the infinite. This involves digging deep into the subconscious, and it can be a dark experience at times. You may need to explore a variety of archetypes and integrate your shadow, which is uncomfortable but ultimately empowering. You are meant to explore the unconscious and understand how it manifests in the physical, hidden in many forms. When life forces you to change, you must learn to go with the flow. You have been too attached to your own plans in the past, and now you are learning to follow life itself. You cannot know or comprehend this path, that you are too small to see the big picture. But you're meant to develop faith in the fact that there is a greater harmony unfolding. You just have to stop resisting, accept what is, and go with the flow. Once you stop trying to paddle upstream and float with the current, you will be carried to far greater vistas than you could have found on your own. You are learning that we are each a piece of the larger whole of life, and each of us is responsible for our own piece. That means you must stop trying to control or rescue others, and you must also stop waiting for a rescue and take responsibility for your own healing and spiritual ascension. When you do, you will be doing your part in the grander scheme of life. The more you heal, the more positive will be your ripple effect across the lives of those who meet you. Ultimately, you will have the opportunity to cultivate a deep faith in life and in yourself that eases your anxiety and allows you to live each day more fully, authentically, and freely. As the final sign of the zodiac, Pisces contains a little of all the other signs. It is therefore a placement of tremendous wisdom and compassion. It is not concerned with the temporary and transient, but sees the infinite and eternal within what appears as transient. It sees the self in all and all in the self. It transcends the mundane and the physical. It is unity consciousness that knows the truth that all others are seeking. It is your destiny to find it. Before you begin, I cannot emphasize enough that this process of psychological evolution does not require you to completely abandon your South Node and run willy-nilly into your North Node. When people do this, they often misinterpret their lessons and go off track. For instance, early on I tried to actively cultivate the qualities of my own North Node, but I still had so many habits, good and bad, in excess, from my South Node that I hadn't fully understood or gotten control of yet. Those South Node tendencies actively undermined and inhibited my ability to pursue my North Node, even though I truly believed that's what I was doing. So instead we must first seek to understand our South Node. Every quality, and every sign, has positive and negative manifestations, depending on its context, how it is used, and how evolved the person using it is. For example, with your South Node in Virgo, you're incredibly analytical, but this skill can also result in analysis paralysis. It's not about disowning your logical mind and becoming a lazy hippie who lives in the woods and lives on mushrooms. It's about understanding when and how to leverage your analysis, and when it becomes self-sabotaging. Maybe you don't need to spend weeks dwelling on the pros and cons of buying a house, but you do need to use your intellect to take pragmatic steps once you've decided based on a combination of logic and intuition. Even more easily, we can misunderstand the lessons of our North Node, precisely because it is the most foreign to us, unless we have personal planets in the same placement or element, which makes it easier. In your case, someone with a North Node in Pisces in the 12th house may think they just need to join an ashram and meditate their way to some vague notion of happiness or at least contentment, but this would be an immature expression of that placement. Instead, waiting and looking for lessons about letting go and incorporating mindfulness into their daily routine is a healthier and more effective way to start. Then when they find a spiritual system they're naturally interested in, they'll already have some understanding of how to tune into themselves without deferring completely to an external authority or dogma. Of course, this isn't a linear process. We don't check our lessons off one by one on a list until we get to the reward at the end, and we don't simply move from one end of the axis to the other, though I may sometimes write it that way for the sake of clarity. In reality, our life is our best teacher. Our life is constantly bringing us lessons and reflecting our evolutionary stage back to us, showing us what we've mastered and what we still need to learn. Even more important than anything I've written in this book is that you judiciously reflect on how the themes of your nodal axis have manifested in your life specifically and in the people you've encountered, especially when there is a pattern, and there are always patterns. And just because a lesson repeats doesn't mean you didn't get it right the first time. It often means you're now dealing with the same subject at a higher level. Pay attention to your life. Both the South Node and North Node want the same thing, but they approach the desire from opposite perspectives. In the past, we've been pursuing our soul's deepest desire with the approach of the South Node, and the experience of never really getting what we want is what builds the pressure to pursue the North Node. The North Node path does not feel comfortable, safe, or familiar to us. It may even disgust us sometimes. But life will repeatedly deny us our deep desire until we learn and integrate the missing end of the polarity, the North Node we've left underdeveloped. In your case, your instinct to control every outcome only causes you to lose, until you stop micromanaging like a Virgo and start going with the flow like a Pisces. The only way you can win in this life is to be humble enough to recognize you don't actually have a bird's eye view of life, and therefore can't always know what's best or predict future outcomes. Oftentimes we do not begin to turn towards our North Node until we've truly exhausted the strategies of our South Node. At that point, we have explored all the positive and negative effects of our South Node habits and instincts, and we're able to use them with discernment instead of compulsion. But this point may come only when we feel completely defeated by our life. Exhausted, we're finally forced to try a new strategy, and we end up gaining even more than our deep desire, more than we ever dreamed. The fulfillment of our North Node promise doesn't look like becoming an embodiment of only our North Node, but instead embodying the best qualities of both the South and the North Node. Faith and flow, fear of the unknown. South Node Virgo 6th house people tend to prefer routine and dislike change and surprises, even if they're positive. They'd rather cling to the devil they know than risk meeting an angel. Much of this resistance comes from fear of the unknown. These folks are used to organization and form. New experiences frighten them because they can't predict what role they will have to play. They don't feel comfortable winging things or figuring stuff out as they go, but the truth is that life doesn't come with a map or rules. Our society, culture, religion, parents, even our own egoic, logical mind will try to give us all kinds of rules to follow in order to alleviate the anxiety of freedom, but freedom, love, and oneness are the only real truths. They also fear the unknown because they've been blindsided in the past. Afraid of what they cannot yet see, they try to focus on every little detail so they don't miss anything. But their method backfires. In the process of focusing on the details, they miss the big picture. Then unexpected things come in from outside their periphery. It's like a driver so focused on the car in front of them that they missed the one on their right about to cut them off. Very often, a situation will break down because it's what's ultimately best for all involved, even if it's painful in the short term. Maybe there is a lesson to learn, maybe space needs to be cleared for something better, usually both. Sometimes rejection is divine protection and what's meant for us won't miss us. North Node Pisces 12th house people need to trust that everything is always working out for them, even though they can't make logical sense of it in the moment, from their limited and detailed perspective. If they could see the big picture, they would see what's truly for the best. But they can't. What looks to these folks like chaos often isn't. Consider the vast expanse of the known universe. At a glance, it looks like a chaotic, disorderly mess full of collisions, explosions, and debris. Moving through it, this is what one would think. But zoom out, look at the big picture, and one realizes that it is all part of a harmonious, synchronized order. Everything is in its right place, doing the right thing, even if it is dying or colliding into something else. North Node Pisces 12th house people need to accept that just because they can't see or don't understand the high order doesn't mean that there isn't one in place. It's just beyond their comprehension, and that's okay. North Node Pisces 12th house folks are learning to worry less about defining their role in the universe and doing everything perfectly, and instead to trust their intuition and have faith that they do, inevitably, play an important role in the grand scheme of life, but they don't have to know what it is. Yet the more they trust themselves and have faith, the better they will do. The universal flow, some might call it the Tao or Dharma, has its own timing, frequency, and speed. Often, South Node Virgo 6th house people are going against the flow and almost always trying to make it go faster. But when they push against the flow, they meet with an equal and opposite force. Their resistance invites resistance because they are trying to go against nature. This can be the nature of others, the nature of life itself, or their own nature. Again, instead of forcing their plan or preconceived definitions onto life, They need to allow experience to unfold and let life teach them how things should be. But the idea of doing this frightens them. What? I'm just supposed to stop trying? I'm supposed to just stop pursuing my goals and sit on the couch and play video games? No. That's not what going with the flow really means. It doesn't mean becoming lazy and careless and selfish. It means paying attention to our life and how it is trying to direct us, and not resisting our deeper desires in favor of the more egoic, surface-level ones. For example, a South Node Virgo 6th house person may know from childhood that they want to own their own business. But this seems risky and their parents want them to become a doctor, so in order to fulfill their duty to their parents, they go against their intuition and enter medical school. Medical school is grueling and competitive, which only brings out the worst in their perfectionistic, workaholic nature, which hurts both their mental and physical health. Of course, they burn out and are forced to take a break so they can recover. They can take this as a setback and resist it. I'm supposed to be a doctor. Now I'm losing precious time. Or they can take the hint and realize that they need to change their habits to improve their health. Or listen to their heart and try business instead. Whenever they meet an obstacle that confirms their intuition that they were on the wrong path to begin with, they should accept the confirmation and change course. The longer they persist in the path their intuition tells them deep down is wrong for them, the more obstacles they will meet. As the Bhagavad Gita says, it's better to fail in one's own purpose than to succeed in someone else's. But let's say they make the brave choice of business, and for the first time in years they feel happy and fulfilled. They apply to the top business school, but they get rejected. This is a massive blow, and it seems life is telling them that business is not the path either. Or is it? The South Node Virgo 6th house person is fixated on their preconceived plan, that in order to become a professional, they have to go to college. But is there another way to succeed in business, even without the top school? They could go for a lower tier school or do what many of the most successful millionaires have done, skip school altogether and learn on the job. Even then, they will likely fail many times before they succeed, but each failure is a lesson to carry forward, a slight redirection to the correct path. Eventually they build a business they love, but even better, they had a fascinating journey to get there and have incredible wisdom to share with others. If everything had gone right for them from the beginning, it would have been much less fulfilling than seeing their hard work and persistence pay off. In this example, we can see two principles operating. First, trusting our intuition of the right destination for us. Second, having faith that things will work out even when we have to change our plans of how to get there. By slowing down and following the flow, North Node Pisces 12th house folks end up accomplishing more. They need to stop trying to paddle their boat upriver and instead choose the path of least resistance and let themselves flow with the current. Not only will they reach a better destination faster with less effort, but they'll be able to relax and actually enjoy the ride. Analysis paralysis, the limit of logic. South Node Virgo 6th house people have fantastically analytical minds, but their capacity for analysis has been overused and overdeveloped. They think they can apply the same logical method to everything in their life, and are somehow continuously surprised when again and again, it fails. Still, they don't know how to abandon logic because they have not developed their emotional nature or intuition. These folks are constant thinkers, the type who cannot turn their brain off. They are so detail-oriented they easily get overwhelmed by all the information there is to analyze, to the point where they struggle to make meaning because there's too much data. They don't know how to filter effectively. They end up overwhelming themselves into a constant state of anxiety. Because they dealt with such high-stakes situations in the past, they developed a habit of looking for potential problems before they could occur. Unfortunately, in this life it backfires. Now they see problems that aren't there and aren't even likely, yet they still hyper-focus on these possibilities and often end up creating self-fulfilling prophecies or, at minimum, keeping themselves in an unhealthy level of anxiety that hurts their health. The problem is that South Node Virgo 6th house people try to apply logic to situations that require intuition or emotional intelligence. Consider the character of Hermione Granger, for instance, who was largely designed to illustrate both the advantages and disadvantages of being highly logical. Her penchant for the rules leads her to tattle on her friends even when they're doing good things, and her logical thinking causes her to exclude people and dismiss truths simply because she doesn't understand them. She lacks emotional intelligence much of the time as well as intuition, and these deficiencies are not compensated by her logic. Only being surrounded by her more intuitive friends saves her from this flaw. For example, she judges and looks down on divination and people like Luna Lovegood, an excellent example of the Pisces archetype, simply because she doesn't understand them from her rational point of view. She refuses to take Luna seriously, even though Luna is often right and is on the same team as her. Similarly, Hermione dismisses divination only to be proven wrong by Professor Trelawney's accurate predictions. Her rational approach doesn't accommodate the reality of her universe any more than exclusively Newtonian physics accommodate the reality of ours. Quantum physics has turned our understanding of the universe on its head, and anyone clinging exclusively to the logical Newtonian framework loses out. What South Node Virgo 6th house people have to accept is that they can't always access all the information they need. Deep down, what they really need to accept is that they don't know best and don't have all the answers. Yet they have a strong internal pressure to have everything figured out. Often they didn't get to be kids, but were instead parentified children, and they had to know things before their time. But no one has everything figured out, and as they enter adulthood and their problems get more complex and nuanced, their anxiety increases because the answers are not so straightforward. This gives them a persistent feeling of inadequacy, and it can take a long time to get over, if at all. The irony is that they do actually have the right answers, just not where they're used to looking for them. What they need to realize is that thinking can actually be incredibly counterproductive. All their second-guessing and analyzing doesn't resolve problems. It is just a way for the mind to give itself the illusion of control while simultaneously doing nothing productive. Instead, they need to pull back, look at the big picture, and see how their current circumstances can move them closer to their goal. They can discern between what is within and outside their control, then release what's outside their control to a higher power and focus on what they can do themselves. Then they can take action without being attached to the outcome, and as they complete each step, the next step will reveal itself. There are some methods and exercises to help you practice this in the North Node Pisces 12th House workbook on northnodesignandhouse.com. South Node Virgo 6th house people need to develop the humility to admit they don't have all the right answers, in their conscious, logical, egoic mind. However, like everyone, they are connected to a deeper wisdom within themselves. Once they learn to tap into this reservoir of insight, and practice using it, they will be able to respond more effectively to life's challenges, especially because they'll be able to balance intuition with logic. We can't know the whole route of our lives from beginning to end. We have to take one step at a time and focus on the step we're taking in the moment. As we successfully complete each one, we will know what to do next. The rest we can surrender to a higher power. But worrying about the future is only going to hurt, not help us. From small details to big picture. South Node Virgo 6th house people have already mastered the art of gathering information and focusing on their immediate surroundings. They believe that if they just collect all the facts, they'll never be caught off guard by life. They'll always have an answer to the questions life poses them. Deep down they feel intellectually insecure and inadequate, and may pursue high degrees in order to safeguard their ego, or else resent the lack of opportunity to do so. More than merely communicating the facts, North Node Pisces 12th house people are learning to give meaning to the data. They've gathered all the information, but they still get overwhelmed and can't make sense of it. What they need to do now is step back, look at the big picture, and connect the dots. A fantastic symbol of this is a graphic designer creating infographics to communicate hard data to the masses. Once they begin to notice how everything is connected, they'll start to sense their own place in the world and feel more secure in that place. They are shifting from being a journalist who collects and reports the facts to being a poet who illuminates deeper meanings. Past life experience has given South Node Virgo 6th house people a very narrow focus. They become so fixated on a problem that they can't see anything else. They can't even see the problem clearly because they're too close to it. It's like trying to judge the size of a mountain while you're right beside it. You need to step back to see the whole thing. When these folks get fixated on a problem in this way, they only make themselves feel worse and more frustrated because their very focus is the problem. On top of that, the state of tension they're in negatively impacts their relationships, so that the issue has a ripple effect across different areas of their life. It's therefore essential that North Node Pisces 12th house people learn to recognize the signs of when they're unhealthily fixated on a problem. What are the physical symptoms? This could be muscle tension, stomach problems, heartburn, headaches, more than most nodal placements, Their physical and mental health are deeply connected. What are the mental symptoms? Usually it is obsessive thinking over that specific thing, intrusive thoughts, or negative, judgmental, critical talk towards self and others. What are the speech symptoms? This is often complaining or criticizing. These are some, but not all, potential symptoms of hyperfixation. There are exercises and journal prompts included in the North Node Pisces 12th House workbook on northnodesignandhouse.com to help you with this. Once they recognize that they're fixated on something, North Node Pisces 12th House people can take it as a sign to step back. First they can check the facts. Often they'll realize that they've been making erroneous assumptions, and the problem they thought existed actually isn't a problem at all. Then they can check whose control it's in. Often it's not in their control, or else it would be fixed already. This is when they can do a responsibility transfer, a technique included in the North Node Pisces 12th House workbook. Lastly, they can take a break and do something else. Time in or near water is especially healing for these folks, even if it's just a quick shower. Lastly, they must practice acceptance. Whether the problem is real or resolved or not, accepting the situation is often the most helpful thing they can do. Why? Because the energy of acceptance is transformative, not just for the one in acceptance, but because often, once we accept a problem, it resolves itself. So often we hear the story of the person who only met the love of their life once they gave up and stopped looking for a partner. This story can be true for North Node Pisces 12th House people in many areas of life. The South Node isn't all bad, though. It includes the skills we've mastered and can teach to others. These folks have a lot of workplace karma, and that can be for better or for worse depending on their specific chart and experience. Because in past lives they have already mastered the practical details, they can now teach those organizational and efficiency skills to others. What they need to do is get and stay in touch with the big picture, the larger vision of what they're doing, why they're doing it, and the long-range goals that determine daily activities. When they do this, they are wonderful leaders and colleagues, able to inspire others with their vision while also empowering others with practical tips. It gets even better when they add empathy and compassion into the mix. This focus on compassion and the big picture helps them avoid some of the negative workplace karma they have incurred, because if they stay focused on their compassion and vision, they are less likely to get egoically involved, judgmental, controlling, or too detailed. That's when people resist them and conflict ensues. If they stay humble and connected to the big picture, the details naturally fall into place. Having a narrow focus also means they sometimes forget to take others' dreams and visions into account. While they can be very selfless and service-oriented, their thoughtfulness is usually limited and doesn't account for the big picture. For example, a South Node Virgo 6th house person might plan a trip to New York with their partner. They plan out the whole route and all the details, ensuring to prepare the car and pack it with their partner's favorite snacks and comforts. But they forget to consider that their partner's parents live somewhere along the way, and they don't consider stopping. Their partner still feels neglected because while their small needs were met very thoughtfully, the South Node Virgo 6th house person failed to consider their deeper needs. The fact is that people don't feel truly cared for unless their dreams and emotional needs are being considered, not only the superficial ones. When their partner wants to alter the route, that means changing the South Node Virgo 6th house person's plan, and they instinctively resist. They come up with all kinds of excuses. It's out of the way, it'll delay their trip, it'll mean less time in New York, but the truth is that they just don't want to change their plans, to which they're already attached. These conflicts often result in a standoff and contribute to the depletion of trust in the relationship. The work environment and over-identifying with a role. Deep down, South Node Virgo 6th house people are still trying to fit themselves into a specific role, because with that role comes a procedure, and then they'll know how to do everything perfectly. That was true in the past, but not anymore. The 6th house rules the work environment, and South Node Virgo 6th house people have a lot of karma here. It may manifest as good, bad, or extremes of both. They most often encounter karmic relationships with their co-workers. South Node Virgo 6th house people identify strongly with the work or service they perform. On the plus side, they have a strong sense of duty which is very noble. But they easily get trapped in their role and feel guilty if they're not doing it. Their perfectionism leads to workaholism as they continually stay later to just fix one more thing. Of course, there's always one more thing. The problem is they see themselves as a human doing and not a human being. They think who they are is what they do, but this lifetime is about learning that who they are is already intrinsically valuable, and not to be confused with what they do. Often their perfectionism, judgment, and criticism come out in the workplace, and their co-workers and employees are their targets. They don't simply let others find their own way of doing things, they think everything needs to be done the way they would do it. They forget that other people have strengths they don't, and that as long as something gets done, it doesn't matter so much how it got done. When they take over someone else's process, they also rob that person of the opportunity to learn, thus perpetuating the problem. But they are often indispensable to their workplace or organization. They make excellent managers due to their eye for efficiency and their tendency to notice what others overlook, easily picking up the slack that others don't see. Their meticulousness, analytical nature, efficiency, reliability, and planning capabilities, along with their genuine desire to be useful and help others, often make them the most valuable employees. It's therefore easy for them to satisfy a lot of their emotional and egoic needs at work, the danger of this being that they derive all or most of the self-worth from their job, and not from who they intrinsically are. Of course, if anything happens to their job and they lose it, this can devastate not only their financial situation but also their sense of identity and value as a human being. At the negative end, they may feel confined at work. They likely feel unappreciated or underpaid, usually because they invest far more in their job than necessary. These folks rarely do an adequate job, let alone the bare minimum. They always go above and beyond, but it's not always helpful, necessary, or even appreciated. When this happens, that's life reminding them to derive a sense of self and worth outside of the workplace. Either way, a lot of anger and resentment can build up around the workplace, and North Node Pisces 12th house people are learning just how powerful one's emotional energy can be. However they feel in the moment, it's likely to rub off on others. When these folks are in a bad mood or feeling anxious, everybody feels it. When they're happy and peaceful, it cheers everyone else up, even if they don't say anything specifically. This is another reason why they need to put their being before their doing, and take care of their emotional state before they go out into the world. This is why a mindfulness practice is so essential for them, as is learning to pause and take a break when they get too tense. Very often, these folks find that their ideas are accepted or rejected based on their emotional energy, not only their job performance. A colleague can technically perform the job perfectly, but if they're awful to be around and hurt team morale, their performance might not be enough to keep them there. This is also true in reverse. South Node Virgo 6th house people can be very sensitive to other people's emotional energy and it can easily infect them. It is hard for them to develop energetic boundaries strong enough to protect themselves. But when they learn to shift focus to the big picture and tune into the energy of love that is all around us, they can detach more easily and are not so much at the mercy of others. Turning their focus from the material world to the intangible, spiritual world is a learning curve worth climbing for the sheer peace it brings. It also enables them to respond more compassionately to others, making all their activities and relationships more successful. More than anyone else, these folks benefit from working alone, whether they can work from home or have their own private office. Even if they can't get a private space at work, working in a corner or turning their desks away from others can help. Perhaps worst of all, their attachment to their role leads them to wear a mask at all times and robs them of connections with others. It leads to isolation because they think if they let themselves feel truly equal and become emotionally involved with their colleagues, they would lose their self-definition and superior status. But the more they do this, not only do they become more isolated but they actually attract people into their life who expect them to play that role, which only traps them more deeply. It might feed their ego superficially, but it traps their spirit. These folks are not meant to have their self-concept limited to their ego identity or the role they play for others. They are meant to experience the fullness of their humanity, which wears many masks, and at the same time, none. Their attachment to playing a role leaves them constantly at the mercy of others and their environment. They believe that in order to feel stable, everything outside of them has to be clearly defined and they have to know their place in it. But this is a recipe for confusion, misdirection, and letting others dictate their lives. Instead of attuning to the outside world, they need to attune to themselves. Only then will they develop the sense of stability and inner peace that will alleviate their constant pressure and anxiety. Becoming free of perfectionism. South Node Virgo 6th house people carry the intense pressure of perfectionism from past lives embedded deeply in their subconscious. Not only are they learning it's okay to make mistakes, they're actually not allowed to be perfect anymore. Anytime they try, their efforts will backfire in what's known as the backwards law, according to which the harder we try, the more our efforts boomerang and the more we fail. It's only once we let go of our attachment to results that what we want comes to us, usually in a form we didn't expect. The more South Node Virgo 6th house people cling to their idea of how things should be or get done, the worse they typically feel. They can even have real fixer mentalities that seem helpful on the surface but are actually very toxic. This perfectionism can also give them a superiority complex, even if only because perfect is always superior. This is obviously an ego defense mechanism. These folks cling to their status as role models, but it backfires on them as others sense their superior attitude and instinctively rebel against it. What they are learning is that everything is actually already perfect in its imperfection. There is nothing to fix, change, repair, restore, manipulate, control, or criticize. The South Node Virgo 6th house person's innate sense of the ideal is incorrect. Everything is already as it should be, especially as it's also always changing. Nothing will ever reach a static state of perfection and never transform again. Life is in constant, perfect flux. And so are they. The problem with purity. South Node Virgo 6th house people are often preoccupied with the idea of purity. Sometimes this can be a full-blown purity complex, especially if they grew up in a religious and especially Christian environment. But even without the sexual hang-ups of purity culture and the damage it causes, these folks can have the subconscious feeling that they are somehow not pure enough, spiritually and morally, to deserve their dreams, or even basic needs like love, comfort, and security. But this is a bottomless pit. No one can ever be pure enough because we are all flawed human beings. The concept of purity is itself an unattainable ideal, and in that way, it isn't real. Purity is a concept human beings have created, not a phenomenon we have observed. At times we believe we observe it in others, but this is always a projection. We cannot know what is in another's heart, mind, and soul. Only we can know how pure or impure we are inside. And if we're honest, we're not pure. Part of South Node Virgo 6th house people's preoccupation with purity is really about self-trust. They want to be able to trust their intuition and desires, but in order to do so, they must ensure that their intuition and desires are morally pure, untainted by ego or malice. Because they are so analytical, they can easily turn their sharp eye on their own mind and find all kinds of reasons why they are not coming from the right place or not good enough to be able to trust themselves. This is a very tricky game the mind plays on itself in order to avoid the risk of pursuing what we truly, deeply want. For example, consider a South Node Virgo 6th house person who wants to be an artist. Even though they want to make art in order to connect with and uplift others in an act of selfless service to the collective, they fear that deep down their desire to make art is only coming from their ego and need for attention. So they abandon their artistic path and get involved in non-profits instead. Only to realize that there is ego there, too. No area of human life is free of human foibles, and people can do ostensibly selfless things for completely selfish reasons. Because the South Node Virgo 6th house person talked themselves out of their deep intuitive desire to make art, they are now off path, and to paraphrase a line from the Bhagavad Gita, it is better to fail in one's own purpose than to succeed in someone else's. Now even when they return to art, they know they have lost valuable time and resources all because they doubted the purity of their motivations to begin with. This is where it helps them to understand the layers of desire. There are, of course, the superficial desires of the human animal, to seek pleasure and avoid pain. This is pure hedonism, to enjoy the whims of the physical body without regard for long-term consequences or effects on others. Then there is the egoic mind, which wishes to preserve a particular self-image, through the status of beauty, money, job, prestige, or moral high ground. This is where we all get most easily lost. The South Node Virgo 6th house person's egoic mind usually wants to preserve their self-image as helpful. But this is a juvenile way of masking their moral posturing and deceiving both others and ourselves. They are trying to preserve their self-image as a good person at the expense of actually doing the correct, honest thing. More deeply, there is the soul or higher self, the part of us that operates beyond the egoic mind, the watcher, the observer. It's the part of ourselves we tune into during meditation, the intuition that speaks to us in whispers. This is the source of our deepest desires, the ones that transcend the egoic mind. It wants what is in the highest good of all, including ourselves. North Node Pisces 12th house people can access this level more easily than any other placement. Once they tune into it, they will see there is no such thing as you or me, better or worse, no need to judge, no need to be pure because there's no such thing as impurity in the whole. What South Node Virgo 6th house people don't realize is that they can align their ego with their soul's purpose. When they have a deep conviction, especially about their career or daily purpose, they can trust it because it is coming from their soul. Then when they put their ego in service of that, because the ego is a terrible master, but a wonderful servant, they can truly serve all. Consider the humble bee. Bees are essential to our ecosystems. Without them, even human society would look very different. Countless species of plants depend on them for their reproduction, which has a ripple effect across the planet. But from the bee's perspective, they are just selfishly following their instincts to collect food for their hive. They have no idea what role they play in the grand scheme of things. And they don't have to, they just have to trust their instincts. We can learn a lot from them. The real purification these folks need to is let go of the idea of purity. Instead they must develop a deep trust in themselves. Simply by following their instincts, they play a role larger than they can know, and it's okay not to know. Releasing resistance. As the saying goes, what we resist persists. This is as true for South Node Virgo 6th house people as it is for anyone, but they have a particular karmic lesson in acceptance. These folks are already operating from a basis of needing to control their external environment. When things in the external world start to go wrong, their need for control intensifies, but as they apply more and more energy to the situation they just make it worse by getting more attached and more frustrated, which leads to more mistakes. South Node Virgo 6th house people like to feel useful by fixing things, even if it means creating a problem just so they can fix it. We spend all our lives in school being given problems to solve, so that when we go out into the world as adults we are trained to look for problems. But what if there aren't any? North Node Pisces 12th house people need to practice the art of surrender. Due to past lives of being responsible for so much, they still think they can control the outcome of situations if they just get it right. But that is not the lesson in this lifetime. Their lesson now is to recognize what is outside of their control, the responsibility transfer, and when their involvement only makes things worse, the backwards law. Oftentimes, they'll find that once they accept a situation it resolves itself, or else they realize that it wasn't as bad as they thought. Again it comes back to faith, trusting that life is on their side and everything is working out in their favor, even if they can't understand it. Once these folks learn to surrender and truly make a habit of acceptance, life will reward them beyond anything they could have imagined. Ultimately, we don't know what is best for us. In fact, studies have shown that we are terrible at predicting what will make us happy in the future. If instead of trying to direct every step and phase of our lives, we simply focus on being in harmony with life and with the flow, we will inevitably find ourselves in the right role, environments, and outcomes. Whenever they do experience the resolution of a problem, South Node Virgo 6th house people may become fixated on analyzing why. But this is not so much a desire to understand as a fear that the problem will return. In the process of analysis, they end up recreating the problem, even simply by attracting that energy back into their life. So here is a deeper level of acceptance. Not only do they benefit from accepting that a problem is what it is, but they benefit even more from also accepting that they don't understand why, even that they don't understand how it was resolved. Instead of analyzing all the whys of their life, it's better for North Node Pisces 12th house people to accept that they don't know everything and to shift to the feeling of gratitude instead. Instead of trying to understand why something happened the way it did, they need to simply appreciate its resolution and whatever lesson they learned from it. As they practice gratitude and appreciation, they will not only enjoy life more, but attract more good things their way. They are learning to be in awe of the mystery of life, to appreciate it without needing to understand. Over-communication. Mercury is the ruler of Virgo and the 6th house, as well as Gemini and the 3rd house, and governs intellect and communication, among other things. South Node Virgo 6th house people are fantastic writers and speakers and tend to process everything verbally, though that means they intellectualize their emotions instead of feeling them. Once South Node Virgo 6th house people feel safe enough with someone, they communicate quite freely with that person, usually a best friend or a partner. This is wonderful in many ways, But the downside is that the person becomes a dumping ground for all the South Node Virgo's 6th house person's anxieties and complaints. The person is likely to hear every stray concern that wanders through the native's mind, which is a lot. They'll hear all about their workplace drama, family complaints, social anxiety, everything. To the outside world, South Node Virgo 6th house people appear to be incredibly professional and self-sufficient, but their partner or close friend knows the frantic child underneath. Over time, this habit of venting to someone grinds down the relationship. It's as if the South Node Virgo 6th house person is bringing all their problems to their friend and saying, "Here, you deal with it." They don't really expect their friend to solve their problems. In fact, they don't usually want advice, just a compassionate listener. But they don't realize how draining it is for the other person, who becomes burdened by all the South Node Virgo 6th house person's negativity, pessimism, fear, anxiety, and insecurity. As great as these natives can be at communicating, when they don't put boundaries around what and how they communicate, they turn it into a negative that can do a lot of damage to the people and relationships they care most about. Over time, their friends and partners begin to feel like their dumping ground. Because they process everything verbally, more than anyone else they can benefit from journaling and therapy. Simply writing 2 or 3 pages of stream of consciousness every morning or evening can do wonders for their mental health. It's been shown to aid emotional processing and cognitive organization, as well as reduce anxiety, regulate moods, and even boost immune function. There are many journal prompts included in the North Node Pisces 12th House workbook designed specifically for this placement on northnodesignandhouse.com. Additionally, having a therapist they can talk to regularly, whose job is to compassionately listen to them word vomit all their issues, can provide them with enormous psychological relief while also easing the burden on their relationships. Deep down, South Node Virgo 6th house people are old-school romantics. They think they should be able to share everything with their partner and friends. They're not entirely wrong, but they're not discerning about what everything means. As usual, they don't discern between what is important and what is an irrelevant detail. So when they go to talk to their partner, they say everything that's on their mind, and it's overwhelming for the other person, at least, as long as they're compassionately listening. After a while, they usually can't anymore, and have to start nodding along just to get by. The South Node Virgo 6th house person, being attentive to detail, notices that their partner no longer truly listens to them and becomes angry, thinking their partner has lost interest in them and doesn't care anymore. It's not usually that they don't want to care, it's that after months or years of hearing endless repetitive complaints about the same issues, and not having their suggestions taken seriously, the person literally has no more energy to give the South Node Virgo 6th house person. These folks often complain that others drain them, but they don't realize how draining they can be to their loved ones. Their partner has to shut them out to some extent just so they can psychologically survive. Ultimately, what the South Node Virgo 6th house person's endless verbal dumping does is kill the joy and intimacy of the relationship. Since meanwhile they are making self-sacrifices to fulfill their idea of their role without asserting any boundaries to protect themselves, they end up blaming the other person for taking advantage of them and not appreciating them enough. But who can appreciate someone who brings so much negativity into their daily life? No matter how many superficial acts of service the South Node Virgo 6th house person does, it can't make up for the emotional drain and negativity they assault their partner with on a daily basis. Once again they are learning that being comes before doing. Oftentimes the attitude we bring to an activity is more important than what we're actually doing. While writing and therapy help alleviate a lot of this energy, deep down what South Node Virgo 6th house people really want is a higher solution on a spiritual level. No amount of human empathy or practical suggestions is going to cut it. Only faith in a divine order, which doesn't have to be religious, and that things are working out in the big picture can alleviate the anxiety and tension constantly plaguing them and driving their incessant mental chatter. Ultimately, what matters is not what we say but the emotional energy with which we say it. As Maya Angelou said, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. When they speak with the intention of making someone else look wrong or justifying their own position as superior, they are out of alignment with the truth of love. But when they speak from a compassionate perspective, while maintaining compassion and respect for themselves as well, they are in alignment with love of others as well as themselves. There is actually no specific script to follow, but there is a positive and loving energy to embody, and when we get that right, our words and deeds flow harmoniously. The doing comes from the being. Beneath criticism. South Node Virgo 6th house people are incredibly judgmental, and their attitude can unintentionally rub off on others, especially those closest to them, who easily internalize their negativity and criticism. These folks do not know the difference between the important and unimportant, and thus get themselves worked up unnecessarily, unable to let the little things go. This neurotic and negative tendency eats away at their physical and mental health, while infecting those around them and creating a toxic atmosphere. Sadly, they don't realize that their own critical voice becomes someone else's inner critic. Their criticism isn't always coming from a negative place though. They have an eager eye for people's flaws and imperfections, and genuinely want to support others to be their best selves, so they make suggestions and give advice. Unfortunately, it only comes across as critical, judgmental, or at the very least, invasive. What they need to work on is asking permission before spouting their opinion, otherwise they're giving unsolicited advice and their words hurt more than they help. The answer, as always, is to practice acceptance instead of judgment and resistance. When they remind themselves that we are all doing the best we can at the level of consciousness we have, they will recognize that some flaws and mistakes are actually lessons that we all must pass through, in one life or another. As they embrace this attitude, they will discover that others are much more likely to change when they're not being pressured into it. Their job in this life is to provide comfort, support, compassion, and truly unconditional love rather than judgment and criticism, no matter how constructive they believe it is. In spite of how much they criticize, South Node Virgo 6th house people really can't take what they dish out so easily to others. Part of why they pressure themselves to be perfect is to avoid being criticized. They also criticize others in order to avoid confronting their own flaws and inadequacies. Although they might be very self-aware, they resist digging deep and actually accepting who they are and loving themselves unconditionally, warts and all. Before critiquing others, they need to take a good look in the mirror and ask themselves if they're doing something to provoke or enable the other person's poor behavior. They cannot control others, but they can always control themselves. The silent, or not so silent, judgments they make about others are really the judgments they fear others have about them. They need to stop projecting and turn their attention inward before casting stones. It's ironic, but much of their social anxiety is completely self-induced. No one is judging them the way they are judging others. Of course, even when they start practicing this, there is a risk that non-judgment, or any other Piscean ideal, becomes yet another rigid standard of perfection. They must guard against this too. They will inevitably slip up sometimes, and must practice forgiveness and self-compassion even when they struggle on their nodal quest and spiritual path. Underneath their criticism is their need to control, and underneath that is anxiety, and what drives their anxiety is actually their love for others. If they didn't love people, South Node Virgo 6th house people wouldn't criticize them. Instead of defaulting to critique, they need to get in touch with the deep love that is underneath, and work to let go of the anxiety that's fueling their negative behavior. Once they dissolve their anxiety, there will be nothing left but love. Letting go of the plan. In the past, South Node Virgo 6th house people always had to plan ahead or else they would fail. And for a long time, that worked for them. These folks have tremendous planning abilities and can always strategize to reach a goal. In fact, it's something they can teach to others. It's likely that life has put them in touch with people who don't plan at all the way the South Node Virgo 6th house person does, and it may be a source of tension between them. But in fact, they can both learn from one another. While the South Node Virgo 6th house person can teach others, gently, without judgment or criticism, how to plan, they can learn from those same people how to relax their grip a little. Very often, life will throw in a last-minute obstacle that thwarts the South Node Virgo 6th house person's plan. That's life reminding them that they can't stay too rigidly attached to their idea of how things should be. What they should learn from this are two main things: to be more flexible and to be more humble. First, if everything always went according to plan, life would be pretty boring. North Node Pisces 12th house people are learning that there is fun to be ahead and spontaneity and thinking on your feet, and in fact, thinking on your feet is a real test of one's intelligence and ability to get the job done. They need to be adaptable and resourceful, and see that the real fun and adventure comes from surprises and unexpected twists. Think about how a story sounds after the fact. A story where everything goes according to plan is boring, but a story full of twists and turns and surprise events and overcoming obstacles is one that's really interesting and fun to read. Such events make the North Node Pisces 12th house person a wiser person. Second, if everything went according to plan, it would mean we could predict the future, and even a South Node Virgo 6th house person can't do that. They must learn to humble themselves and realize that they don't actually know how everything should go. In fact, should must be eliminated from their vocabulary. The dark side of their empathy can come in the form of manipulation, as these folks abuse their empathetic gifts to manipulate others. When they manipulate others into following their own secret plan, they create very bad karma for themselves, and ultimately their plot backfires. As the saying goes, man plans and God laughs. This is true for South Node Virgo 6th house people more than any other placement. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't plan at all. After all, planning is a great strength they bring into this life, but that they should be humble and flexible enough to pivot when they need to. And they should expect plans to change. Another aspect of the futility of over-attachment to plans is that South Node Virgo 6th house people tend to overplan. Sometimes they actually use planning as a way to avoid taking action. They'd rather plan the thing than do the thing. But they can be unrealistic in their planning, pressuring themselves to get too much done in too short a period of time. This is because their ideal is more real to them than the reality. The answer to this quandary is to slow down and actually observe themselves in action. Instead of planning ahead to get things done on a schedule and forcing themselves to stick to that schedule, they could go through their day or week with no planned structure and instead track their time. When they track how they're spending their time, they will have a more realistic idea of how long things actually take and when they need to rest or do other things. Ironically, they're likely to find they're actually more productive this way, and it feels much better to look back at a list of what they did rather than a list of what they didn't do. Relaxing into the flow of life is what North Node in Pisces in the 12th house is all about. It just requires a level of self-trust these folks haven't developed yet, but they won't believe it until they prove it to themselves. Once they take the risk of, not forcing themselves into an inhuman schedule, they'll be surprised by how much they get done, and how much better they feel about it. Instead of limiting their experience based on rigid expectations, they can allow their experience to expand their definition. Control is almost always an illusion. Releasing responsibility. Their need to critique is partly due to the fact that South Node Virgo 6th house people feel overly responsible for everything. If something goes wrong, even if it wasn't their fault, they feel wrong. Guilt and tension build up inside of them, which only increases the pressure to be more perfect. It's a vicious cycle in which they can only lose. What they need to do to release this illusion is realize that they are not responsible for everything. It's a kind of God complex they have. They think they can control everything, or at least they should. But they need to eliminate should from their vocabulary. Instead, when they start to feel this kind of pressure, they can make two lists: what is in their control and what is out of their control. Then they can release what is out of their control to life or whatever high power they believe in. With their pragmatic intelligence, they can easily make a plan to tackle what's in their control. In addition to those two lists, it may help to make a third list: what they can delegate. These folks do not like to delegate because they don't trust other people to get things done correctly. The saying "if you want something done right, do it yourself" was probably coined by a South Node Virgo 6th house person. What they don't realize is that delegating actually gives other people the opportunity to learn and to gain confidence in their capabilities. South Node Virgo 6th house people have had a lot of experience being very productive, and they don't realize how hard it is for someone who's just starting to learn. The South Node describes our blind spots, but we're not only blind to our flaws, sometimes we're blind to our strengths too, and we easily take ourselves for granted. South Node Virgo 6th house people need to give themselves more credit for how efficient, attentive, and detail-oriented they are. They need to recognize that others haven't learned those skills yet, and learning takes time and practice. When they refuse to delegate, they rob people of the opportunity to learn, an opportunity they themselves once benefited from. An important exercise for them is to delegate tasks even when it feels risky to trust the person with those tasks, and then follow up not with criticism and judgment but gentle encouragement. Instead of launching into a lecture about how things should be done, they need to refrain and ask permission to teach their own way of doing things. As they practice this, not only will they develop more patience, compassion, and trust in their helper, they'll develop more patience, compassion, and trust in life. Being is not doing. The next level of this lesson is to admit when they're wrong and that they don't know everything. South Node Virgo 6th house people hate being wrong, not because they're arrogant, but because they feel so much pressure to be right and perfect all the time. They think if they make a mistake, then they themselves are a mistake. What should be guilt for something they've done turns into shame for who they are. This is an extremely damaging way in which they attack themselves. Very often, because they weren't allowed to make a mistake in past lives, South Node Virgo 6th house people refuse to admit that they're wrong. It's more than just ego and humility. Being wrong can feel like death to them sometimes, like an irrevocable judgment that means not just that their positions is wrong, but that they're a bad person. As usual, they confuse being with doing. Instead, it helps to separate themselves from their behavior and remember that they're only human. The irony is that when they admit they made a mistake or got something wrong, it makes them a better person. A good person can admit when they're wrong, but self-righteousness is the root of all evil. Truly, no one ever did anything evil, Hitler, Stalin, countless terrorists, without believing they were absolutely right about it. The need to be right fuels much of South Node Virgo 6th house people's anxiety. If they find themselves dwelling on past mistakes, it helps to remind themselves, I did the best I could with the level of consciousness I had at the time. That makes it the right thing at that moment of my life. We all must pass through error to arrive at truth. They must recognize that everyone is at their own stage in the evolution of human consciousness, including themselves, and everyone, including them, deserves grace. North Node Pisces 12th house people benefit from practicing self-observation in their daily life, watching themselves from a detached and, most importantly, non-judgmental space. As they practice this, they will be able to discern between their own egoic biases and the reality of situations. They will be able to see how they are hurting themselves and others. The key is to become aware of their own feelings, and how these feelings arise in response to different situations. This is a great use of their analytical mind. It will naturally lead them to make the changes they need to make. All they have to do is step back a little and see the big picture, watching their life from a bird's eye view. Confidence will naturally follow. Perhaps the biggest challenge of this lifetime is for North Node Pisces 12th house people to learn true humility, and lessons in humility can really sting. But life will constantly put them in situations where they make mistakes precisely for this reason. The more they let go of their judgment, criticism, and self-righteousness and learn to have grace towards others and themselves, the easier those lessons will be. Humanitarian pursuits. As the final sign of the zodiac, Pisces contains a little of all the other signs. It is therefore a placement of tremendous wisdom and compassion, and is the quintessential humanitarian and healer offering spiritual comfort to all. With their South Node in Virgo in the 6th house, these folks can be a powerhouse of humanitarian service. Aligning themselves with the higher spiritual vision of compassionately helping other living beings can give them a deep sense of purpose and peace, knowing that their daily activities are advancing a noble life mission. Whether it's education, environmentalism, animal welfare, racial justice, gender equality, LGBTQ+ advocacy, voting rights, youth development, veteran care, mental health, a particular heritage, sexual violence prevention, curing a specific disease, gun violence, religious persecution, hunger relief, immigration, community unity, human trafficking, humanitarian relief, or a whole host of other issues, their innate talent for efficiency, pragmatism, detail, and analysis can not only shine but significantly advance a good cause. Especially because these pursuits are very long-term, it helps them keep the big picture in mind and not get too attached to their results. Of course, this only works as long as they maintain the energetic boundaries previously discussed. Otherwise they run the risk of losing themselves and sacrificing too much. Unequal relationships. South Node Virgo 6th house people are some of the best to partner with due to their loyalty, reliability, selflessness, and genuine desire to help and be of service. They tend to be diplomatic and effective communicators when their ego and judgment are not clouding their vision. They can be wonderful to live with because they are so good at taking care of everything on a practical level. Of course, it's easy for less organized people to rely on South Node Virgo 6th house people too much. Because it's natural for them to take care of everything, and it's easier for them to do things themselves than let others do them. South Node Virgo 6th house people often end up in lopsided relationships in which they're the ones doing all the work while their partner remains contentedly taken care of. Because South Node Virgo 6th house people are afraid of burdening others with their own needs, they compound this problem because they don't ask for help or delegate duties, let alone communicate their more vulnerable emotional needs. These folks need a strong intellectual connection in order to enjoy a relationship. They don't date dummies. Their insatiable desire to learn and improve means they tend to partner with people who are experts in some area and from whom they can learn. Unfortunately, this can exacerbate the lopsided effect if the South Node Virgo 6th house person feels in any way inferior to their partner intellectually, socially, or financially. Because Virgo is the sign of service, they easily put themselves in subordinate or subservient positions, especially in romantic relationships. Part of this is due to their attachment to playing a role, but they easily get stuck in a role, even one of their choosing, and give up their freedom and the full possibility of who they can become. Sticking to their role also prevents their partner from seeing who they really are, as a full human being in all their varieties and manifestations. They are simply more comfortable this way. At least at first. Because they are so strong, South Node Virgo 6th house people can also do and endure more than most people. They see that something can be done and they think, well, I'm exhausted, but I can take care of it. It's easier for me than it is for them. But this betrays their lack of boundaries. Just because they can do something doesn't mean that they should. Just because it's harder for someone else to do doesn't mean they shouldn't push themselves to do it, because the only way we get stronger is by pushing ourselves. North Node Pisces 12th house people do best when they seek to create equity in their relationships rather than just doing as much as they can and making excuses for the other person. They have to develop respect for themselves, knowing when to stop, and respect for others, having more faith in their ability to take care of themselves. The harsh truth that South Node Virgo 6th house people don't want to hear is that their self-sacrifice doesn't usually do anyone a favor. They are actually just teaching others that it's okay to take advantage of people. This has a terrible ripple effect through society, and it's up to them to put their foot down and erect boundaries to stop the cycle of abuse. It's not realistic to continue as they are and just hope that others will change. They have to lead by example and be the change they wish to see. Eventually, they begin to feel drained and resentful about how uneven the relationship is. This is because they never established firm boundaries from the start, and often they begin relationships by setting up an unequal dynamic and set of expectations. Once this uneven foundation is in place, it's very difficult to change it later on, but the sooner the better. South Node Virgo 6th house people rarely choose a partner who brings them a sense of unconditional love and inner peace. Instead, they choose partners with whom they can have a clearly defined role. Because they think in terms of service, they end up in very transactional relationships instead of ones that are genuinely mutually supportive. These relationships are made up of two codependent people trying to get their needs met through one another instead of two independent people who can fulfill their own needs but still freely choose to be together. The latter idea scares the South Node Virgo 6th house person. If they don't need me, they'll leave me. Only someone who is using them will leave them if they no longer need them. But someone who truly loves them yet doesn't need them is the one who stays purely because they have genuine, deep, unconditional love for the North Node Pisces 12th house person. Once they let go of their need to control another through creating transactional relationships, and begin to cultivate their own independent sense of universal love, they will be able to discern and choose partners who are also coming from a healthier place. As long as we come from a place of need, we're not making a free choice, and true love only comes with the freedom to choose. Because these folks so easily feel the emotional energy of others, they are particularly vulnerable to their partner's energy. If they have chosen poorly, this does not bode well for them. They often feel trapped not just in their role but in the energetic bond they've created, and they don't feel they can leave until that energy has been worked out and the person releases them from the bond. Only once they feel they've fulfilled their duty to the person do they finally leave, often long after the damage has been done. As long as they approach their partner from the place of their role rather than their inner truth, they perpetuate this cycle. However, it is entirely possible to change the existing dynamic, or at least try, but it takes enormous work when they've already laid uneven foundations. To try to change things, they have to begin by asserting boundaries to protect themselves from their own self-sabotaging behavior, and start to express their emotions more honestly, especially their anger. South Node Virgo 6th house people don't usually express their anger well or in a timely manner, and combined with their lack of boundaries, they build up a lot of resentment. They tend to intellectualize all their emotions and approach conflict from a practical view, and while the issue may be temporarily resolved on the surface, it is likely to resurface in another problem later on. This is another example of the limits of logic. We cannot often solve emotional challenges through logical means. Even when South Node Virgo 6th house people believe they have addressed an emotional conflict in the relationship, the issue often remains because they haven't allowed themselves to truly express the emotion itself. Of course, South Node Virgo 6th house people's perfectionistic tendencies can also show up in relationships, in the first place, by whom they accept and reject as partners. They can sometimes have unrealistically high romantic standards. Consider someone in their 30s who wants a family but has never had a long-term relationship because they haven't met anyone who meets their long list of requirements. As long as they reject people who don't meet their unrealistic standards, because, let's face it, they themselves wouldn't meet their own standards, they not only miss out on potential relationships with wonderful people, but they also miss out on the learning opportunities and experiences presented by those relationships, even if they weren't the one. If and when they finally do find someone who meets all their criteria, they lack the experience to actually make the relationship successful, and instead sabotage it through their own ignorance. They don't just sabotage themselves, they hurt everyone. Alternatively, South Node Virgo 6th house people may go to the opposite extreme with their desire to see the best in people. They overlook red flags and deny unpleasant truths, idealizing the partner and putting them on a pedestal. This pushes them into the unhealthy lopsided dynamic in which they feel inferior to their partner. Their perfectionism shows up again in their judgment and criticism. Once the honeymoon phase is over and they begin to see that their partner is a flawed human being like anyone else, their nitpicking sets in and can slowly destroy the safety and intimacy of the relationship. Their partner easily internalizes the criticism and begins to feel they're not good enough for the South Node Virgo 6th house person. As with any time we feel unworthy of something or someone, we reject them. Eventually their partner leaves, believing they're doing the South Node Virgo 6th house person a favor anyway, since they were so imperfect. Whether they idealize their partner or nitpick them to death, South Node Virgo 6th house people tend to foster unequal relationships in which one always feels unworthy of the other. If this is a pattern, it is due to the wrong size of ego. An outsized ego manifests as both arrogance and insecurity, while a healthy ego manifests as both confidence and humility. Playing rescuer and needing to be needed. South Node Virgo 6th house people's Achilles heel in relationships is their tendency to play rescuer. They have spent so many lifetimes healing others that they are still looking for someone to save, with the unconscious expectation that the healed partner will turn around and save them in return. This is part of their compulsive desire to fix everything and everyone around them, an aspect of their need for control, combined with their needs exchange approach. This is not a fun thing to admit to oneself. First they must discern between those who want help and those who don't. Of those who want help, there are two kinds, those who genuinely want to improve themselves and those who want to be freeloaders. Out of their sense of responsibility to the other person, South Node Virgo 6th house people easily get trapped in unequal relationships, unable either to leave or to change the dynamic without feeling unduly guilty. Driven by their sense of duty, they strive to live up to their saint-like sense of perfection that necessitates a level of self-sacrifice that will never be enough to heal or truly help anyone. Their erroneous senses of guilt, duty, and responsibility lead them to remain in unproductive situations long after their expiration date. They just can't say no, and as a result, others take advantage of them, subconsciously if not consciously. What South Node Virgo 6th house people must recognize is that rescuing is not love. True love does what's best for the other person in the long term, even if it means hurting them in the short term or looking like the bad guy. But these folks have such unhealthy egos that they would rather hurt the person they love than be seen as the bad guy. Deep down, they think that if they can heal their loved ones then that will somehow prove their own worth. It won't, it's just a bottomless pit of self-sacrifice for nothing. The truth is that most of us never really know our own power. We are all far more capable, competent, and stronger than we give ourselves credit for. It's not until we're pushed to prove it, usually through crisis, that we actually believe in ourselves. From that we develop increased confidence, resilience, and faith both in ourselves and in life. But we all need to pass through the shadow of the valley of death at some point in order to realize this. South Node Virgo 6th house people come from so many incarnations of responsibility that they think their loved ones will fall apart without them. The problem is that they won't, and the idea that others don't need them is what truly scares the South Node Virgo 6th house person. These folks need to be needed. As long as they believe someone else needs them, they never have to show up for the one who really does, themselves. They won't show up for themselves until they realize that no one else is going to turn around and save them in turn. They have to rescue themselves. And they won't do that until they deeply feel that they are worth rescuing. This self-worth issue, the truth that I deserve the same unconditional love, compassion, and support I give to others, is an essential one for them to resolve. It comes from finding the true right size for their ego, a healthy ego that sees everyone as equal, including themselves, and not because of anything they do, but simply because they exist. They must understand that all life is valuable simply because it exists, and there is nothing that any of us need do in order to prove our worth or earn our love. Once we step back and see the big picture of life, we will not be able to deny this essential truth of existence. What North Node Pisces 12th house people really need to fix are the parts of themselves that are attracted to this rescuer role and unequal dynamic. Many times it is a subconscious ego trip because it automatically puts them in a superior position to the other person. This enables them not only to maintain power in the relationship, but to continue avoiding and hiding their own issues. What helps instead is to recognize that everyone is responsible for their own healing, including the North Node Pisces 12th house person. Instead of trying to heal others, they need to focus on healing themselves. As they heal and raise their own level of consciousness, it will naturally raise consciousness and healing in those around them. Instead of focusing on others, they have to lead by example and heal themselves. Our first duty is to care for the piece of life that is ourself. Only then do we have the authority to even begin to help others. Often South Node Virgo 6th house people know they are not perfect and feel immense guilt, and they use this as an excuse for why they should stay with someone they know deep down isn't right for them. How can I complain? I'm no angel either. But this is just an excuse to stay with what they know instead of risking the unknown. They must recognize that leaving is often not only the best thing for themselves but the best thing for the other person, too. Otherwise they continue mutually enabling one another's toxic behavior. But they tend to be in denial about their unhappiness and feeling of entrapment in their roles. They feel guilty and think they shouldn't feel that way. The truth is that feelings are always valid, they're just information. Emotions are how our soul communicates with us about when we are and are not in alignment. When we feel deeply happy, we feel it on a soul level and know we are in alignment. When we experience negative emotion, it is because either something in the external world is not right for us or our way of thinking about it is out of alignment with the truth and how our soul sees it. As North Node Pisces 12th house people learn to put their being, feeling, before their doing, tune out the extraneous external details and tune into the higher order of the big picture, they begin to align with their soul and can discern and follow their intuition more accurately. Remember, anxiety screams, intuition whispers. As they do this, they are less and less controlled by their circumstances and more in flow and harmony with life and themselves. Emotional vulnerability and intimacy. Often South Node Virgo 6th house people will seek partners who compensate for their practical nature with a very emotional one. They themselves feel very deeply and can be profoundly compassionate, and they need someone who makes them feel safe enough to express this. They are actually very sensitive people and need someone who is emotionally intelligent and perceptive enough to notice their little signals, preferably someone as detail-oriented as they are. When our partner is missing these qualities, it's very easy for the North Node Pisces 12th house person to feel overlooked and underappreciated. Like everyone, they need to feel seen. But to be fully seen, they have to let go of the role they believe they play in the relationship. They have to be brave enough to be vulnerable and express their emotions, and the full range of who they are as a human being. Only by shifting from doing to being are they able to achieve true intimacy with their partner. But this is hard for them. While they are very loving in practical, surface-level ways, they tend to be emotionally unavailable. They don't easily understand this. When their partner complains about a lack of love or intimacy, the South Node Virgo 6th house person protests. What do you mean? I cooked you breakfast. I cleaned the car. I brought you flowers. But even bringing someone flowers is a surface-level gesture. It is not the same thing as bearing your soul to someone. True intimacy requires these folks to relate to others on an equal level, and they have trouble with this. They have either been servants or servants in past lives. They are used to power imbalances. Again, being comes before doing. In romantic relationships, this can take the form not only of their own inner work, but creating an environment supportive for intimacy. A beautiful and harmonious home, a romantic and sensual setting. South Node Virgo 6th house people are well equipped to create the right environment for intimacy. Releasing their attachment to the plan is also helpful here. They must focus on the big picture of love and let the little things go, becoming flexible and learning to pivot when things don't go according their way. Allowing the path of love to unfold before them without trying to force anything is key. For example, they may believe they can't have a romantic relationship with their friend because their friend is already dating someone. But because they are practical, they jump on the next best option, even though they're not passionate about the person. 6 months later, their friend breaks up with their partner. But the South Node Virgo 6th house person is now invested in the relationship with their second choice. And since their friend no longer has a partner to keep them in the same city, their friend moves away. The South Node Virgo 6th house person spends the rest of their life wondering what might have happened if only they'd been chill enough to be single for 6 months. Emotional release. In addition to the interference of the logical mind, emotions are also messy, unpredictable, and uncontrollable, all things South Node Virgo 6th house people detest. They are afraid of their own emotions, let alone someone else's. Surrendering to their emotions feels like death, but it's only the death of a part of the pain body, as Eckhart Tolle calls it. One way to release this excess emotion is through the letting go technique. Emotions are energy in the body, and we hold different emotions in different parts of our body, emotions that have been repressed and built up over the course of our lives. When a thought, person, event, or situation triggers an emotion, it taps into all the other times we felt that way, and we remember other events and situations that confirm that emotion is real for us. So when a colleague rejects our attempt to sit with them at lunch, we remember all the other times we felt rejected, and it can be overwhelming for South Node Virgo 6th house people because they have such passionate emotional natures. Once we remember all the other times we felt rejected, it worsens that feeling and seems to validate it, thus our mind concludes, everyone always rejects me. But this, we also know, is not true. It's just how it feels in the moment. The problem is that there is so much emotional energy for the mind to tap into in the body, so much we have not fully released. So we have to practice letting go. This is a technique described by Dr. David Hawkins in his book Letting Go, which can be immensely helpful for getting ahead of negative emotions so they don't sabotage our lives. When we feel triggered into an intense emotional reaction, we need to isolate ourselves and allow ourselves to feel what's coming up. We need to put the focus on the physical feeling in the body and keep our focus on that, without getting caught up in thoughts and memories of other times we felt this way. There are many resources to help you practice this included in the North Node Pisces 12th House workbook on northnodesignandhouse.com. The promise of North Node in Pisces in the 12th house is a reunion with oneness, a blissful and intimate merging with others in the movement from separation consciousness to unity consciousness. But for this to occur, they have to gradually release their grip on their sense of a separate self, and to do this requires them to let go of the limiting beliefs and emotions that have accumulated over the years. The more they let go, the more they surrender, the more they are able to connect with others and experience the true oneness of all. This is the key to their salvation and completion. Addiction and escapism. Due to the intensity of their own internal pressure, until they learn to master their own minds, detach from outcomes, and surrender to life, South Node Virgo 6th house people have a strong need to escape themselves. They can do this in healthy and unhealthy ways. The unhealthy ways are obvious: addiction to drugs, alcohol, television, video games, food, relationships, etc. But even healthy habits can become unhealthy addictions: a rigid diet, excessive exercise, escapist reading, obsessive self-improvement, and workaholism are just a few examples. Anything that comes from a need to control or to numb and repress emotions is an act of escapism. It is not wrong to want to escape now and then, we all need to unwind at the end of the day. But when this becomes a daily or excessive habit, one that we struggle to give up, that's when it becomes a problem. As long as we are dependent on something external, we are not free. The key, as with everything, is to bring awareness to the escapism. Even as we pour ourselves another glass of wine, we can think, what am I trying to numb here? What am I repressing when I do this? South Node Virgo 6th house people are good at seeing through logical fallacies, so it isn't hard for them to bypass the easy excuses the mind makes. Oh, it was just a long day, and it's healthy to have a glass of red wine, and see the deeper issue. I just don't want to think about what so-and-so said this morning. It really touched a nerve and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. They can go ahead and enjoy the wine and a little television, but resolve that first thing in the morning they will journal to get to the root of the issue. Instead of escaping, these folks need to make sure they are always addressing their subconscious and the things they are trying to repress. It is not enough to simply force ourselves to stop indulging in our addictions. We need to address the root causes, the things within us we are trying to escape. That takes work, and a lot of it, daily habits, conscious choices, mental self-awareness. There are resources and exercises included in the North Node Pisces 12th House workbook on northnodesignandhouse.com. It takes time to experiment and figure out what methods work for us and how to integrate them feasibly into our daily routines. After a while the same method may lose its efficacy and we have to find a new one. This requires a strong commitment to ourselves and to our spiritual ascension. Pisces rules all forms of escapism, drugs, alcohol, excessive sleep, etc., but also spiritual ascension, meditation, higher consciousness, oneness, unconditional love, and bliss. It's up to North Node Pisces 12th house people which path they choose. Embracing solitude and spiritual highs. South Node Virgo 6th house people have had so many incarnations of service out in the world that this lifetime is scheduled for them to take a breather. That's why they easily become exhausted by over-involvement in the outer world. They are learning that their attempts to control the outer world are futile. Finding this method no longer works, they must instead turn inward. Periods of solitude give them the opportunity to contemplate the microcosm within themselves. They discover that everything they habitually seek outside themselves, they already have. The whole universe is within. Because these folks are in a constant state of anxiety, they need to withdraw from the world on a regular basis to look within, and sort out and release their worries. Journaling is one of the best ways for them to release their constant inner chatter. The act of physically writing things down reduces our cognitive load, freeing the mind up to focus on what's important. With Mercury, the planet of thinking and communication, being the ruler of Virgo and the 6th house, journaling and brain dumping are especially helpful for these folks. In the process, they can develop the clarity and self-awareness to resolve the messy emotional problems that their more practical nature struggles to fix. As they make this a habit, their inner resistance will naturally dissipate. Because being comes before doing, these folks need to tend to their emotional needs before they can tend to their practical problems. When they approach a physical or interpersonal problem in an agitated or anxious state, they inevitably sabotage the situation, but if they take time to prioritize their own mental and emotional well-being first, they do everything better. It is actually easy for these folks to slip into higher states of consciousness when they learn to calm their mind and body enough. Pisces rules enlightened states of consciousness, the oceanic feeling of oneness with all. North Node Pisces 12th house people are meant to increase their state of consciousness in their daily life. However, they cannot force this to happen because then they will activate the backwards law. It is a gentle balance of daily practice combined with the surrender of expectations. It's only when they are not trying that they will experience the highest states of consciousness. Eventually they will experience for themselves what the sages of ages have said, that we are surrounded by love like a fish immersed in water. We become enlightened only once we realize that we always have been. It's simply a matter of wiping away the illusions of the mind so we can see clearly the reality of love. When North Node Pisces 12th house people make a regular habit of solitude and spiritual work, they will slowly come to embody higher and higher states of consciousness. As they do so, they will naturally sync up with life's flow, and everything will become easier as they continue to surrender and accept what is, realizing that nothing is wrong or needs to be fixed. Their higher vibratory energy will be felt by people who encounter them, and this higher state of consciousness will naturally rub off on others. That is truly selfless service, to raise one's own consciousness, because each of us is responsible for our part of the whole. That is our true role. Cultivating mindfulness. South Node Virgo 6th house people are excellent at organizing their routine, planning their day, and making the most of their time. When they apply this intelligence to developing their spiritual awareness, they can make significant progress that has a beneficial ripple effect throughout their life. When these folks get too stuck in their linear, repetitive routines, their past life issues of rigidity, perfectionism, and role-playing get triggered and they lose sight of the big picture. When this happens, they inevitably get off track, as they fail to pivot and adjust their daily activities to align with their vision. It's therefore essential for them to practice repeatedly stepping back and getting in touch with their private dream for their life. When they do this, they're able to discern what are temporary issues and unimportant details they can let go of. When they release their fears and negative emotions, they free up their mind to focus on the positive things they want to cultivate. The simple act of setting intentions around what they want to manifest in their life is sometimes all they need to bring it to fruition. As they practice stepping back to look inward at the big picture, they will gradually begin allowing it to fall into place. More than any other placement, North Node Pisces 12th house people need to set aside time for solitude. This is when they can journal or do other activities that allow them to turn their focus inward in a soothing way. In addition to journaling, a daily practice that really helps them is meditation. It can take time to figure out a meditation method that works for us, and often we have to change our method every now and then as our needs change and we ascend to different spiritual heights. It's important to remember there are no rules here, there is just what works or doesn't work for us in the moment. Some people simply focus on a candle flame or the sound of their air conditioner, some do a full body scan, tuning into each part of their body at a time and then to the body as a whole, some add awareness of the space around their body, the room and building they're in, some focus on specific breathing techniques, directing the breath through the body and contracting and relaxing different muscles, some simply focus on the void inside their own head, dissolving their consciousness into the quantum field, and some do combinations of all these techniques and more at various stages and varieties. It doesn't matter what you do, as long as it works for you and you do something consistently. It can also help these folks to read from spiritual texts, the I Ching, the Bhagavad Gita or Rig Veda, the Tao Te Ching, Buddhist sutras, the Popol Vuh, the Torah, Bible, Quran, A Course in Miracles, anything that they feel drawn to and comfortable with. It doesn't matter what path we choose, or even if we choose no path, for as the Bhagavad Gita says, all paths lead to truth. At the very least, a familiarity with the common themes of all religions and spiritual beliefs can be enormously comforting to North Node Pisces 12th house people. If they're not sure how to proceed, books on comparative religion such as Houston Smith's World Religions or D.K. Big Ideas The Religions Book and the Philosophy Book can provide solid overviews. While perusing these texts may be initially uncomfortable, they can ultimately provide great relief to the South Node Virgo 6th house individual by helping them zoom out and see the big picture. Yoga, breathwork, qigong, and other physical practices can also help South Node Virgo 6th house people, who are already so in tune with their bodies. They will find that they can easily access spirit through the body, and in fact, many of these practices have been proven to reduce anxiety. Time in or near water is also enormously soothing for these folks, as they are moving from a double Earth South Node to a double Water North Node. Making a conscious ritual of a shower, bath, or even the drinking of water can help. If they are lucky enough to live near a body of water, no matter how small, a creek, river, pond, lake, or the ocean, visiting and if possible, immersing themselves in it can soothe them. Visiting a sensory deprivation tank can be a way of supercharging their water practice, as it can completely relieve tension and stress from the nervous system. Whatever they choose to do, it's essential for North Node Pisces 12th house people to follow their intuition, not their anxiety, experiment with different things, find what works for them, and make it a regular habit. It's also important they remain flexible. No plan is going to work 100% forever, and they need to allow themselves to pivot and find new methods when the old ones lose their efficacy. Spending time in solitude and tuning into themselves and the bigger picture of their life is what the North Node in Pisces in the 12th house is all about. As they do so, they will be able to let go of their anxieties and judgments and begin to cultivate instead an unconditional self-love and faith in life that will reward them exponentially and have ripple effects across their life. Working with archetypes. The 12th house is the seat of the collective unconscious, and as such, working with collective archetypes can be enormously valuable for the North Node Pisces 12th house person. Archetypes are universal ideas that show up as mythological characters across most, if not all, cultures. One easy example is the archetype of the hero, who shows up in virtually every story. Another is the dying and resurrected god, or twice-born god, such as Osiris, Tammuz, Adonis, Attis, Zagreus, Dionysus, and Jesus. As mythic figures, these characters reveal inherent psychological processes embedded in humanity's collective psychomythology. The archetypes are neutral, but to the degree an individual or society represses or denies them, they become good or evil, with only one side seen and the other hidden and denied. Wholeness in a human being comes from seeing, recognizing, integrating, and honoring both sides. Thus in the 12th house we often store the hidden aspects of these archetypes. Often what we hide from ourselves is most apparent to everyone else, which makes the sequential symbolism of the astrology wheel so apt. Whatever is in the 12th house is close to the ascendant and thus, while hidden from ourselves, quite obvious to others. Our hidden enemy is our own unacknowledged self. Instrumental versus intrinsic value. These folks are accustomed to deriving their sense of self-worth from their job. Even if they don't consciously get their self-worth from their job per se, they get it from how useful or helpful they think they are to others. Either way, they define their value as instrumental. They're only as worthy as the deeds they do, and therefore their value is something they not only have to earn, but constantly maintain. They get caught up in an endless cycle of constantly trying to prove themselves, to society, parents, friends, partners, bosses, some vague sense of others, themselves. This is conditional love. Oftentimes, it's how their caregivers treated them growing up. They were shown love and affection only if they performed. It becomes how they treat themselves and how they treat others around them, so that in turn, they pass their feelings of inadequacy and unworthiness onto others in their life, especially those closest to them. It's not until they deeply understand intrinsic value that they are able to truly express unconditional love, both for others and, with more difficulty, themselves. All life is valuable simply because it exists. It doesn't have to do something in order to be worth something. That is a construct society places on life due primarily to its economic systems. It's not that nature lacks its own ecosystems, but it is free from human judgment. As Shakespeare wrote, nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. To love others for who they are and not what they do for us marks the difference between immature and mature love. Selfless love involves loving someone for their intrinsic value, admiring their qualities, and being grateful for their mere existence. Selfish love involves loving someone just for their instrumental value, for what they do for us, and viewing the relationship as a form of needs exchange. Selfless love wants the best for the person, even if it means letting go of the relationship. Making a relationship into a mere exchange of needs ultimately burdens South Node Virgo 6th house people. Eventually they feel weighed down by the responsibility of fulfilling someone else's needs and maintaining someone else's psychological well-being. It doesn't work for anyone involved. Beneath their need for love and approval is the profound fear that they are not worthy of it. They put so much pressure on their relationships because subconsciously, they're trying to earn the right to be loved. Of course, what they don't realize is that true love is not something we have to earn, it simply is. While relationships are very conditional, if you hit me or cheat on me, I must end the relationship. Real love is unconditional. You broke my heart but I still love you. Learning how to accept true, selfless love is the ultimate karmic lesson for North Node Pisces 12th house people. It requires them to truly view themselves as equal to others and view others as equal to themselves. It requires them to stop putting others on a pedestal and stop looking down on others with judgment and superiority. It requires them to stop trying to control everything and trust that life will bring them the right people at the right time. It requires them to devote themselves to the highest cause of all, love itself, not the personal, possessive, passionate kind of love but the transcendent, universal love that is the essence of the energy of life itself, flowing effortlessly through all living beings, including them. This is one of the supreme spiritual lessons of life. It's one thing to comprehend it intellectually and another to deeply feel it. As much as possible, North Node Pisces 12th house people must practice actually feeling unconditional love and intrinsic worthiness, both for others and in themselves. Through this practice, they will come to realize that they don't have to fulfill any role or check any tasks off a to-do list in order to be worthy. They already are. From separation consciousness to unity consciousness. At the heart of every religion and spiritual faith, and even of physics and biology, is the knowledge that all that lives emerged from a single source, whether we call it God or the singularity that preceded the Big Bang or life itself. This vague idea is almost universally agreed upon. What Buddhism calls unity consciousness is not only the intellectual awareness of this inherent oneness, but the emotional, psycho-spiritual experience of it, and it is the subject of enlightenment. Yet we are all born into physically separate bodies and raised in cultures and societies that teach us separation consciousness, a state reinforced by our egoic minds and their instinct for self-preservation. This is the belief that all we are is separate from other people, other animals, the earth itself, and the universe at large. When it comes to the nodal axis of astrology, it is my belief that some have a harder time accessing unity consciousness than others due to past lifetimes spent in survival mode and attachment to material reality. These include the Earth's south nodes and some of the fire south nodes, including the south node in Virgo in the 6th house. Due to having spent so much of their past fighting for themselves and their own survival, it is harder for them than for others to slow down, step back, and see the big picture, that we are all part of the same whole. It is important for these placements to strive for the experience of unity consciousness. They can do this through meditation, reading spiritual and philosophical texts, listening to spiritual teachers, spending time in nature, and more. It is not that we should deny the reality of separation, though. Separation consciousness is often dismissed as an illusion of the physical world and egoic mind, but we incarnate separately for a reason, to learn our nodal lessons, to evolve consciousness, to ascend spiritually. We are here precisely to experience separation. The ultimate fulfillment of spiritual awareness may just be that both unity and separation are true, and to hold both states of consciousness simultaneously as we move through life, elevating neither one over the other but learning to live as both. Appreciate the gold. Before we conclude, I want to remind you to appreciate the gold in the shadow of your South Node in Virgo in the 6th house. South Node Virgo 6th house people possess exceptional attention to detail and strong analytical skills. They have a natural ability to observe the world around them and notice nuances that others might overlook. This meticulous nature makes them highly organized, allowing them to excel in tasks that require precision and methodical planning. Their practical approach to problem-solving means they are often sought after for their advice, as they can break down complex issues into manageable steps, providing clarity and direction. In addition to their analytical prowess, South Node Virgo 6th house people are known for their reliability and strong sense of responsibility. Friends and colleagues often find them to be dependable and trustworthy, making them valuable team members and supportive companions. Their nurturing nature drives them to help others, whether through offering a listening ear or lending a helping hand. With their blend of intelligence, practicality, and empathy, South Node Virgo 6th house people create an atmosphere of support and stability, making them cherished individuals in both personal and professional settings. Our South Node isn't only about what we get wrong or do to excess, it also includes what we've mastered and can teach to others. No quality is wholly good or bad, but each one has both a light and a dark manifestation. Once we learn how to express our South Node in a healthy way with good boundaries, aware of its dark side, we can reach back for the gold in the shadow and share its light. We can teach others the skills we've mastered, leading by example and helping others learn their Virgoan lessons. Once it is balanced, our South Node also becomes the foundation for our North Node. As with everything, each archetype contains the seed of its opposite, like the yin-yang symbol. It is precisely because South Node Virgo 6th house people understand the value of compassion and selfless service so well that they are able to turn their skills inward and finally give themselves what they've hitherto only given others. It is through this balance they can finally achieve the sense of peace and oneness for which their soul deeply yearns. Further practice and inquiry. I hope this ebook has been illuminating for you on your personal quest for growth. In all my work, my goal is to help raise the collective level of human consciousness. We are each responsible for doing so, by taking responsibility for our own individual piece of consciousness. With the information I've communicated here, I hope you feel more empowered to take care of your own. I wish to communicate a few more things to look for which may be helpful. First, I didn't just want to dump theory on you. As I wrote these ebooks, I realized there were so many references, books, videos, podcasts, as well as reflection questions and practical actions, that could help you think and problem solve in even more ways, in ways I didn't have the space to delve into in this ebook alone. Conscious of the fact that reading theory is just the tip of the iceberg, I wanted to give you practical ways of applying your new knowledge to your life specifically. That's why I created a workbook for each nodal placement on northnodesignandhouse.com. Recommendations for books, movies, videos, podcasts, and more provide food for thought and explorations of the Virgo 6th house/Pisces 12th house themes. Journal prompts and activity recommendations lead you off of the screen and into the world, where you can be empowered to make a difference in your own life. Even though this book series on the nodes specific to sign and house is a huge leap forward in the collective project of astrological study, each chart is so completely unique that there are still more factors that may influence your specific experience. For some, the path is easier; for others, it seems to be blocked at every turn. While I don't want to overwhelm you with information, focusing simply on the information above is already an enormous project. If you ever feel blocked or confused, here are a few keys in your chart to consider. First, consider your big three, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, in context of your nodal placement. Ask yourself, why would a soul with these nodal challenges choose a personality with these big three? For example, a North Node Pisces 12th house person is likely to have a Pisces Ascendant, and let's say they have a Capricorn Sun with an Aries Moon. With a Pisces Ascendant, the midheaven is likely to be in Sagittarius, the Sunday may be in the 10th house and the Moon may be in the 1st or 2nd. With the Ascendant in Pisces, their early life likely engendered some of its themes and prepared them better than most South Node Virgo 6th house people for their nodal lessons. But they needed the egoic strength of an Aries Moon to experience the healthy self-regard required to defend themselves. The Capricorn Sun further indicates the need for a strong ego. With the Sun placed in the 10th house, career is important to this person, and detaching their self-worth from their work is more challenging than for the average South Node Virgo individual. With the strength of their Moon, they are likely to be a pioneer or thought leader of some kind. Yet the North Node indicates the need for ego dissolution, including in their career, so their luminaries will hinder their progress until they learn the right size and place for their ego. Second, consider any aspects made to the nodes, less than 4 degrees. You can find plenty of articles online by searching for any relevant aspects, but for the sake of simplicity I will note here that harmonious aspects, trines and sextiles, help, conjunctions challenge, and squares indicate a skipped step, a karmic lesson one completely missed and must redo. In our hypothetical Capricorn Aries chart, let's suppose the Capricorn Sun is trine the South Node and sextile the North Node. Remember, an aspect to one end of the nodal axis is simultaneously an aspect to the other end. This means the person's grounded nature is helping them bridge the gap between the South and North nodes, helping them along their journey. They still need to be practical, persistent, and strategic. However, if the Sagittarius midheaven is squaring the nodal axis, it presents challenges. Conflicts between family and career are likely to thwart their nodal progress. Third, the rulers of the nodes carry enormous weight. In your case, the North Node is ruled by Neptune and the South Node is ruled by Mercury, which is another reason your nodal lessons play out in the mind. The houses of these planets indicate challenges and opportunities, respectively. For example, let's say our hypothetical Capricorn Aries person has Neptune in Sagittarius conjunct the midheaven, also squaring their nodal axis. This deepens their challenges, as they have lots of idealistic illusions around their career path, a tendency left over from past lives that makes the lessons of their Pisces North Node even more important. Meanwhile, let's say their Mercury is in Aquarius in the 11th house. Although it may not exactly aspect their nodal axis, this is a very logical, fact-based placement for Mercury, which makes this person's North Node need to forego logic for the sake of intuition even more challenging. Overall, they have a difficult mixture of placements and aspects that both help and challenge their nodal path in a way unique to them. It would be the task of many lifetimes to interpret every possible configuration of Big Three, nodal aspects, and nodal rulers in combination with each nodal placement. It has taken me many years just to write these 144 ebooks on the signs and houses of the nodes. But I hope this example has given you a clue of how to suss out any additional challenges or blocks your particular chart may represent. If you're not sure, I recommend finding an astrologer who specializes in the nodes and can interpret your chart specifically. If and when I am personally available, I will make it known on the website. Famous North Node Pisces 12th house individuals. Learning about the lives and choices of your fellow travelers can help you see both healthy and unhealthy ways of leveraging your South Node wisdom and pursuing your North Node purpose. Ferdinand de Saussure, Alec Guinness, Gerald Ford, Peter O'Toole, Simon Bolivar, William Howard Taft, Diane Fainzerton, Isadora Duncan, Nostradamus, John D. Rockefeller, Joan Rivers, Rihanna, Joan Collins, Tom Petty, Beck, Peter the Great, Carol Burnett, Peter Dinklage, Big Sean, Louis XV of France, Nikki Reed, Laurent Delahousse, Donnie Wahlberg, Jean-Pierre Bacry, Gordon Brown, Nancy Kerrigan, M. Noor, Diane Fossey, Michael Rappaport, Usher Tyler, Justin Chambers, Madeleine Vianney, Ed Miliband, Dick Gregory, Alphonse Daudet,